You're tuned into 9 to 5 Work Rebels with your host, Ebony Gale.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gems in Comms special series brought to you by 9 to 5 Work Rebels podcast in association with Hanson Search, the award-winning international exec search recruitment firm. So I am Ebony Gale, your host for today, and I am super excited to be speaking with a colleague of mine, a very lovely colleague of mine, Kate Isichei, who is a global internal communications expert and author. Now, Kate and I go back, like way back, my first kind of step into the comms arena. I worked alongside Kate, and so that's when we had our first kind of meeting. And you kind of took me under your wing, Kate. You know, you're like my little big sister in the workplace. It was wonderful to have, definitely. So thank you and welcome to the podcast.
No, thank you, Ebony. Really pleased to be here and really excited to talk to you.
Hey, it's excellent. Me too. Who would have thought, many moons ago, and look where we are now, right?
Right, exactly.
No, it's very interesting. Experts in our fields and doing our thing. So I wanted to, of course, this whole podcast series is a series special that I'm doing, and it's literally about giving flowers to people of colour, particularly within the communications industry, PR and communications industry. Now, the industry is very well known for being 91% white at the moment. I think last time it was 92%, it's now 91%, which means that, the stats isn't looking so hot for us. But it is something that the industry is fully aware of. There are lots of initiatives that are out there, but I feel like, it's very important to give the flowers to those who are already out there doing great work, women of colour that are out there doing great work already. So hence why we're doing this series special and, giving you your flowers for what you've already done and contributed to the industry. Yeah. So that's one of the first things I wanted to get across. And of course, wanted to obviously, like I said, welcome you on here. Now, can we get started with the first question, which is really about you telling us about yourself? Now, I know who Kate is, but let the world know. Tell us about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Ebony. So thanks for that wonderful introduction. My name's Kate Isichei. As has already been said, I'm an internal communications and collaboration consultant. So I've spent the last 20 years roughly working with multinational organizations in quite senior roles. Companies that are sort of 10, 20, 30, 40,000 employees, sometimes up to 200,000 employees. So EMEA or global head of internal communications, digital comms has been a big part of my history, and intranet. So I'm a real digital guru, especially when it comes to employee experience platforms, social collaboration, leadership visibility, business strategy, education. Any of those things are my bag. And yeah, I love it. It's something I really enjoy. I'm inspired by. And I've recently set myself up as a consultant in the last 4 years now, 2018. My company is called Where to Look.
Amazing.
Communications. And I've worked with a number of different clients over those 4 years. And it's been really nice to have that autonomy and space to grow.
Amazing. That is amazing. So have you always wanted to work in communications? Like, what attracted you to the industry?
It's a really good question, actually, because so when I was at school, my favorite subject was English. So I was really good at English literature, fantastic at English language, and I could just make up stories like that. So you mentioned earlier that I'm an author. So I've published a collection of short stories, which is my first collection in 2021 called Shop Window.
Amazing.
And I really enjoyed that process. So I'm really creative. I write poetry all the time. If you look at my posts on LinkedIn, you'll see my poems. I post poems on there some days because the inspiration just comes to me. Literally, it could be anywhere. I could be eating, I could be sleeping, or not literally sleeping, but falling asleep. Waking up, with this idea in my head, or having a wash, or whatever it is. And these ideas come to me. So I write them down and I post them. I like to share, my creativity. So that's how I got inspired to work in communications, because I knew I could write, number one. And then, I started working in digital communications on intranets and websites, and really enjoyed that. And then from that digital platform, migrated to management of people in similar roles, internal communications, corporate communications, PR. Then got some promotions into big companies and went from there.
Amazing. And that makes sense because you've got that whole storytelling thing. And,
Exactly.
I think that makes sense as communicators. We do like to be creative and tell stories. So,
We do.
and it is all about, communication effectively. And I always find internal communication is really interesting because obviously you're dealing with the staff, it's internal, and, I'm sure they pull you in a lot for things like change management and things like that, right? Because,
Right.
trying to change the whole ethos of an organization or culture of an organization is it's no small feat. I'm sure.
Yeah, behavior change, culture
absolutely.
change, transition of process from one system to another, technology change, all of those things I've worked on, and I've developed communication plans and strategies for that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so I want to get a little bit into your lived experiences. So I think this is quite an important area. And one of the questions that I'm asking everybody is, when did you become aware of your ethnicity? Now, I think this is a very interesting question, and it will be different for everybody. For myself, it was attending school, secondary school in particular, and hearing about a group of, thugs that would go around and would target Black people, and they were called the Chelsea Smilers. And we were told they'd take a blade and would kind of put a smile on your face, essentially, and would target Black people. Or anyone who was of color, essentially. So I remember being petrified going to school, thinking, "Oh my gosh, these people just want to attack us because I'm a Black girl." So that was one of the real kind of stark ones that sticks in my mind. So, what was your one?
Yeah, they sound like a charming bunch. Mine was much earlier on than that, at primary school. So literally in year 1, I was about 4. And I had this friend who I remember her to this day, even though it was years and years ago. And we were really tight. We were close from the beginning, from day one. We sat next to each other in assembly, in class. We used to talk to each other in the playground. We were really close. And, I said to her, let's try and get to each other's house. Let's try and go and have a play date, or, whatever you say when you're 4 or 5. I remember having that conversation with her. And then she said she would speak to her mum. And then the next day, I went up to her and she kept walking away from me. And I remember it really clearly because we were going up the stairs to class. And I couldn't catch up with her because she kept running ahead. And I thought she didn't know I was there, because by then we were really close friends. So I was calling her. I can't remember her name. And she eventually turned around because I was being so persistent. And she said, my mummy told me I can't play with you anymore.
Oh, wow. And then you asked her why? Or no. You just didn't? You just really knew by then?
I just backed off, because from her mannerism and her tone.
Yeah, her tone.
I knew she didn't want to play with me anymore or be my friend. Aww. So as young as I was, I just stepped back.
That is so sad, isn't it? That is so sad at 4 years old to have that sort of, and that's very impactful in terms of childhood experiences. Really do shape our adult experiences as well. And the amount of children that are going through that even to this day, it's really heartbreaking. And how do you manage that? Do you go home and tell your parent? Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I don't remember actually. I remember the conversation with her. Yeah, I think I must have gone and told my mum. And my mum probably tried to make me feel better and gave me something nice to eat, a sweet or chocolate. Yeah. But I don't remember. I just remember it obviously impacted me because I remember it, over 40 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. But it would impact you as a little child being told, your mum's telling you can't play with that person. That's a lot. That is a lot.
But you know what? At the time, I don't know if I necessarily understood it was because I was Black.
Yeah.
It's only later on I managed to add layers of meaning to it. But I knew it was bad. I knew it wasn't quite.
It wasn't a good thing. Yeah, absolutely. And imagine that poor child as well, and what they had to deal with too. To think that your parent has told you, a friend that you like at school, just stay away from them. It's just the psychology at 4. It's just, that's why they talk about how children are not racist. It's literally down to your learned behavior, your experiences, isn't it? Because you were playing, you were close and tight until the mother found out that this child had a Black friend at school, and it was stay away.
Yes, exactly.
Very sad.
Pure to begin with. Yeah,
she's pure. Now she's been contaminated because she's playing with a Black child. Unbelievable.
God knows where she is now.
Exactly. Let's hope she's not still on that trajectory, but who knows?
On that track. Exactly.
Who knows? So as we lead on from that, have you ever kind of felt like your race or your ethnicity has ever held you back within your career?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
definitely. I mean, I see it all the time. You know, I'm really quite qualified, probably I'd say overqualified
Yes.
for a lot of the roles that I've done, and I've had to fight for them.
Yeah.
And you know, it's only because I sort of tower above a lot of people who are my peers that I'm able to keep up and maintain pace.
Yeah.
You know, when people will often say to me, "Oh, you know, you've got so many qualifications, you've got almost too many qualifications, you know, how do you do it?" But I guess that's conditioned, isn't it? Conditioning. As a
Yeah.
black person, I often
Yeah.
feel that black people are conditioned to overqualify themselves,
Absolutely.
to
I was going to say that.
overwork themselves. Yeah,
Absolutely. I was just going to say that because I felt that was that's an interesting comment to make, that you're so overqualified or too overqualified. I don't think I've ever heard a
yeah,
white person say they've been told they were too overqualified. I find that
no,
really fascinating in itself, you know. So it's like, well, you know, we always say, because, you know, our parents teach us work hard, particularly as black children, we have to work hard, harder, 2 times, 5 times, 10 times harder than your white counterparts. So we do that,
yeah,
like yourself. You know, you've got all these accolades, all these achievements that you've done, and then you get told you're too overqualified. It's like, you know,
I
it's
know,
quite
it's
a conundrum, isn't
crazy.
it? It's
It
ridiculous.
is a conundrum. Yeah, you can't, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Yeah, essentially, it's really
Mm.
quite sad. So, would you say you've actually experienced or witnessed racism within the workplace yourself, and
Oh
how was it
yeah, yeah.
handled?
I mean, that's part of the course, as I'm sure you've experienced it yourself.
Yeah,
It's standard practice, and it's not necessarily overt. So when people
it's really
talk about
subtle, isn't
racism, and I
it?
think, yeah, since George Floyd, people understand, because the conversations have happened much more than they used to. People understand that it's not about calling you a name, or, you
Exactly.
know, making noises, or, you know, saying you smell or something stupid like that.
Yeah,
It's more covert than that. So it's to do
absolutely.
with, you know, microaggressions, as they call them.
Yeah.
Nothing micro about them. Yeah, and just making you feel a certain way, making you feel small. I would recommend a show. It's a detective show that's just finished on ITV called DIRA.
Okay.
And it was about an Asian detective inspector, and it talks about, they demonstrate in the drama microaggressions, like the receptionist, the white receptionist, giving her the incorrect lanyard when she joined, of another Asian officer.
Oh, okay.
Obviously thinking, oh, all Asian people
Look
are
the
very
same.
similar. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's easy to get mixed up. Yeah,
Yeah,
that kind
yeah,
of
that
thing.
kind of thing. What would you say you
Mm.
experienced in particular? Did anything stick out to you that you remember? Experienced or witnessed?
Yeah, actually, not long ago, there was an incident about, when was it now? Probably about 2 years ago. I was working with a client, and I was in their offices. This was pre-COVID. Yeah, it must have been pre-COVID. And there was a particular guy who he was an apprentice. And I can't remember what happened, but we were exchanging emails. And I was asking him a question, and he said, "Oh, you know, can you speak to your boss about this, because I'm not sure I can do what you've asked me to do." And he
Wow.
thought the person who reported into me was my boss.
Wow.
Yeah, and I had to correct him, and I said, "No, I report into the chief marketing officer. That
Mm,
person who you're calling my boss is reports into me."
that's right.
And yeah, he apologized profusely. It was bowing and scraping. But I thought, there you go. You see,
There you
you've
go.
just
It's the
revealed
assumption.
yourself there.
Exactly. The
Right.
assumption that you have to be lower because you cannot
That's
possibly
it.
be in that position.
Exactly. I had
Yeah.
to tell him before he corrected
Before he
himself. And he
could,
was a young
yeah.
man. You know, he was 21, 22. So I was really surprised.
You'd be surprised. Absolutely. You'd be surprised. It's that's that sort of thing. It's little things that people don't really realize. You know, I think it's really interesting situation to discuss. So that's one that sticks out to you in particular. A couple of years ago, that happened, and it is
Yeah.
it's a perfect example of what they call microaggression. You know,
Yeah.
and you handled that yourself. I can see. So you went back and you corrected that person,
I corrected him. Yeah.
which was good, which was great. Because I know
Yeah.
that's another thing. Sometimes, you know, depending on who you are as a person, you know, your experiences. Not everyone is comfortable in
No.
challenging this type of behavior or pushing back on it. And not everyone's always in the position to do that. You know, you're senior within the organization, so you can absolutely do that. If you're
Yeah.
junior, you might not feel as comfortable to push back on
Right.
things like that. You know. So
Exactly.
was there? So you did speak up in that. I was going to say, was there ever a time you wish you spoke up about something? Was there anything else that's happened in your career that you thought, oh, I wish I actually spoke up about that? Or a time when
Um,
you did speak up and self-advocate that you were like, you know, I'm really proud that I did speak up about that.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke up about that in that instance, like you say, because I was senior, so it was easier for me, and I didn't really hesitate to do that. But in some instances, it's just too difficult and too politically dangerous to speak up, even if you are senior. So I have been in positions where people have done things, and you've thought, and also it's you know, it's murky. It's not black and white, because you can't, they're not going to tell you I did this because I was racist. And if they are confronted, they could easily hide behind, oh, you know, it wasn't to do with that.
Purpose, nothing to do with that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not related to that. It's because of this, it was because of that. So yeah, that's problematic. It is problematic.
It is.
So there are probably many occasions that I've put to the back of my mind, because you tend to try to, you know, shirk these things off your shoulder, don't you? You don't want to hold on to them.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, you try to eliminate them almost as soon as they happen, because it weighs on you.
It does. It weighs on you, and there's something. It's also that kind of situation of, you know, choosing your right battle. Sometimes for some people, it's like there's so much going on in your own life, personally, whatever you've got going on. It's like you've got to choose the battles, and sometimes you just don't have the energy to deal with that. That's why I know a lot of people who are in organizations, and they just leave because they think, I just can't be bothered with the energy of pushing
much back. Easier. Yeah,
it's easier to come out.
There was a lady, actually, you just reminded me as you were talking, that I worked with about 3 years ago, and she was very clearly racist, but I was lucky that the HR director who I was working with, she understood that she was racist, and she called it out even before I did.
Oh, wow. That's great.
She said to me, that girl's had a problem with you from day one, and I think it's racially motivated.
There you go. That's great. So that is so great to have someone put it out before you.
Yeah, I didn't have to do the heavy lifting. They did it for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. That's a good HR person, you know. And that's
a good,
Yeah, we need more of those, you know, within the workplace. But again, not everyone's open or understands some of the nuances and the microaggressions. Because I find it always interesting. I don't know if you've seen the case recently, as we're on sort of microaggressions, of the lady that took the Ministry of Justice.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
And it's horrible. Ministry of Defence, wasn't it? Ministry of MOD. It was MOD she worked for. And I thought, wow, it was awful. She went through so much, had to push back so much. And to be told by people who don't understand racism that it's not racism, is just a slap in the face of black people. And this is the problem. And they don't get, like you mentioned, the whole microaggressions. That's not aimed at you, so you won't understand it. So I think there's a lot more that needs to be done within that. But I was so glad to see that she actually got a payout. But after over 20 years, this is unbelievable.
Took a long time to get there.
Way too long. A lot of people, you know, in depression, they can't deal with even pushing forward with that amount of pushback. You know,
exactly.
So kudos to her. Yeah, absolutely, it's really hard. I wanted to ask you about what I call code switching. And now, for those who don't know, code switching is all about, you know, whether you can be your authentic self within the workplace. So essentially, you know, when you're with your friends, or, you know, or you're with a group of people who you feel very comfortable with, you might slip into a bit more lingo or a bit more comfortable language. Whereas when you go into the workplace, you know, I think that we tend to change it up for the work environment. So the question is, you know, code switching, do you feel we can ever lead with our authentic voices within the workplace?
Not from my perspective, probably not, because I have a niche background in that I'm Nigerian. You know, my family are Nigerian, so there's not many. I don't think there are many English people, white English people, who would understand if I did switch. So even if I was in an environment with other black people, unless they were Nigerian, I couldn't do it because they wouldn't understand.
Yeah, no,
if that makes any sense.
No,
so I wouldn't be able to do that with, you know, a Jamaican, or, you know, someone from the West Indies or Tobago and Trinidad. I can talk to them in the, you know, the patois style, because I understand that lingo. But I don't think they would necessarily understand them. Like, you'd have to be with a Nigerian to be able to do that.
So, but would you then switch into? If would you feel comfortable doing that if you had friends in the office who were of Caribbean background?
Would you
feel comfortable doing that, but maybe within your own little circle? Because I find that's what happened with me, because my background is Caribbean, Jamaican, and so being in the workplace, the ones that I would gravitate to or have a little banter with, not necessarily in my department, mind you, because, you know, I was the only black girl in my department, but outside the department would be a little bit of banter we would have, which would kind of keep you going. But essentially, I do believe what you're saying is true. I still feel like we're not able to lead with our authentic voices within the workplace. And I feel like that's the difference. I feel like our white counterparts do get to show up as they are at work all the time and be themselves. Whereas for us, there are lots of layers that we are having to deal with. Microaggressions, people's prejudices, and their stereotypes that are kind of hitting us before we've even met them. So I feel like we've always been a bit more come to work very PC, then get home and be a bit more
very guarded.
Yes.
And I would say something actually which isn't directly related to your question but kind of leads into it, and that when I'm in an organization, typically in the UK, or even if it's an international one, most of the Black people, if there are any, they're usually quite junior.
Absolutely.
So if I'm senior, which I usually am, then I'll be the only one. And so there'll be no one on my level to talk to. The only people I can talk to are PAs, EAs, sometimes people in the kitchen who work in the kitchen, assistants, apprentices. That's where I see Black people in very junior positions.
Very junior positions. Yeah, absolutely.
So you're segregated already.
Absolutely.
Because of your level. Yes.
Absolutely. And that's something that I also picked up. And I feel like, that's something that we will understand together, because I've had that kind of trajectory going into companies. I'd be senior, looking around, and the Black faces were not always at senior levels.
Right.
A lot of them were dotted around the organisation, but then when you looked at the hierarchy in the charts, they were always usually at lower levels. Junior, mid. Definitely not necessarily at a high level position, which is obviously quite off-putting in itself. And that's one of the reasons why I actually did go independent, because I wanted to, you get to the point where I felt like I was always the only Black woman in the mix. And whilst I could still put forward my ideas, and I had great creativity, that's good. But after a little while, it does get to you do want to see some of your own, someone who looks like you sometimes,
Exactly.
So,
but in senior, not just people like yourself there, people who are in senior positions who are in the room and have a seat at the table and are actually an integral part of making decisions about
decision making. Absolutely.
Not just being told what to do by everyone else.
Exactly. And I find that's one of the major issues, as well as the issues around the whole socio-economic, they're always from a certain background. You've got, even with what I found even more so, because I've always done a lot of comms, but in-house comms. Doing some work with women in PR, I came into contact with a lot more agency, PRs, and even the agency world. You see how whitewashed it really is to a degree. They're trying to make changes, but I feel like also it's the way that they're being recruited. If you're coming from red brick universities, or if you're coming from certain backgrounds, and you've got a lot of nepotism going on as well. So I feel like there are lots of barriers that need to be dealt with. While some are dealing with them, some are not as dealing with them as well as they could be. Essentially.
Agree.
So another question that I had for you was around becoming aware of the colour bias in PR and comms. Obviously, we just kind of touched on it. So was it something that you noticed as soon as you kind of entered the industry, or is it more something that you've become aware of over the years, the colour bias?
Yeah, so it's interesting because how I entered the industry was through working on intranets. So I was a digital person to begin with. So not right then, no, because intranets are not typically associated with PR. They will either be associated with IT or with HR, or with, back in the day, there weren't many internal communications functions. So, but PR, PR and marketing don't really usually own internal comms. It was always digital groups. And in those cases, they were more mixed. Funnily enough, you have a lot of Asians.
In IT, absolutely,
a lot of Asian people, a lot of Black people. A lot of Eastern Europeans working in IT, because you're not customer facing. So they tend to have people in the back room, so to speak, who might not necessarily have good English skills, or be born in this country, or have the right accent or the right background. So I didn't notice right away, but over the years, as you start moving into managerial roles in PR, marketing, internal communications, corporate communications, you do start to see a barrier to progression, and less brown faces, Black and brown faces, less representation, and less opportunities. So it took me a while. But for example, it's getting better, but even in internal comms, the space is still very white.
Yeah.
Still very European.
Yeah.
In its makeup, but it's getting better. So there are a few people who I've interviewed for my podcast who are coming up, like Anik Simpson, like Jihan Hyde, like Hannah Awanuga, who's the head of employee experience for Barclays. There are some faces coming in, but just not enough.
Just not enough, yeah. But at least we're seeing some. But it's interesting you mentioned that about in the intranet. I always felt like most companies I worked in, luckily, the internal comms was with communications, because I always felt whenever I had organizations that it wasn't, it's just like it makes no sense. It's an intranet, so it's internal communications. It should not sit in IT ever. Yeah. And I used to always think that was, if there's an organization that had that, I was like, this is not a good sign. It's in the wrong bit. You've got to take it away.
Exactly.
It's like, do you understand what it's about? It's communicating.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but you'd be surprised, a lot of intranets do sit with HR
IT, and HR. Yeah, I think that's interesting too. I feel like the HR element, yes, but no, it still needs to be comms. It needs to be a joint thing, but
joint ownership.
Ownership, because they're going to have bits that they need to update. But essentially, it's communicating with the entire organization. So that's messaging. So storytelling and engagement and things like that. So it's interesting, isn't it?
It's political, Ed.
It is political. It so is. Depends where you are and what they're doing and what they're trying to get done, I suppose, isn't it? And exactly. So another question, I suppose it's interesting from your perspective, because obviously I deal with more external communications. So on the internal communication side, would you say, what are your thoughts on allyship? What does it mean for you? And is there any examples of allyship within internal comms? I suppose it's going to be hard now because of what you're saying.
I'd say no, not really. I mean, there are some people who've jumped on the bandwagon because of what happened with George Floyd. Obviously, no one wants to be left behind, do they? Yeah. When it's in the moment, everyone wants to be on the...
PRable.
With the black squares that ended up on LinkedIn and etc. There was some performative allyship, as they call it, back in 2020, but a lot of that has dropped away, has fallen away. Internal communications is still very, very white and European. There isn't that much space. I'll tell you a story. I had a really good conversation with an English lady, white English lady, who's a friend of a colleague of mine. She's an associate of mine, and she's a consultant also. So she was really busy, really overwhelmed, and had a client who needed some work, a project doing. She couldn't have capacity to do it. So she said, look, Kate, I'll hand the project to you, have a conversation with them. If you're not as busy as me, you're free to take the work. And I wasn't working to capacity. I had the space to do the work. Yeah. So, I spoke to the client. You should have seen the call we had, like we're doing now, the Zoom call. And when my camera came on, you should have seen her face drop.
Oh, wow.
Her face literally fell to the ground. She looked so upset. Yeah. And I could see straight away she wasn't expecting, because obviously she'd been working with a white woman.
Yeah. So she's
then she said, I've got a consultant. Yeah, I'm passing you on to. She wasn't expecting that consultant to be of a different ethnic background.
Yeah.
The conversation took place. But it was very obvious that it wouldn't go any further. It was actually really quite disturbing to see it in action.
Definitely. I'm sure it must have been. And for you, it must have been a bit of a, oh, right, okay. So you still got to put on your professional hat, but you already can sense it.
I had to put my professional, yes, but I knew she didn't want to work with me.
Work with you, yeah, you could tell.
Yeah, she was just going through the motions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Her face she was literally incandescent. With anger, yeah.
Wow. So did you feed back to your associate that?
No, I didn't bother.
Interesting. So but again, that sort of thing is really off-putting. But the good thing about being independent is that you can choose who you want to work with.
Right.
So we don't have to waste time with people who don't value us, essentially. And that's the good thing about it. Whereas when you're really stuck in a role, you don't have the choice. Yeah, absolutely. And I tell people that all the time. Like, that's the one good thing, because I remember speaking to a consultant who was saying, what do you worry about people who maybe not want to work with you if they realise that you're black? I said, well, firstly, my name's Ebony. I mean, then they should give it away alone, okay? So if you don't want to just look at the name and be like, okay, right. But secondly, I don't want to work with people who don't value me or who are racist anyway. that's fine. If you're racist, then I don't really want to work with you.
No,
I want to work with those who value me and value what I can bring. So you just have to kind of remind yourself. But that sort of situation is a very stark reminder of, where that wasn't your fault. That was a potential, opportunity that got passed on in your way because of your skills. Clearly, your skill set, is correct. But she was looking for like for like. Whereas the like for like in skill set is what you had, but she wanted like for like in ethnicity.
And culture, yes.
And culture,
Right.
Basically, which just shows that that's maybe her issue. So
indeed,
when things like that happen in general, what kind of motivates you or inspires you to keep going? We know you're a creative person anyway. So like what helps you, to stay on your journey?
Just, I think the faith that I have, I wouldn't say I'm religious, but I have a strong faith. I do go to church quite a lot and I pray in my own time at home. And I feel quite close to, my God or, a higher power. I have a relationship that goes beyond, people and what we see here today and the earth and our earthly goods and our worldly goods. I believe there's more beyond that. So that's what keeps me going, number one. And number two, my family and the inspiration they give me and the faith they put in me every day. My mum and dad, my dad, unfortunately passed away last October. I miss him dreadfully, thank you. But my mum and my dad instilled in me a very strong work ethic from day one and always said I could do anything. They were so proud of me and they just motivated me. So that's what keeps me going. I know that I'm here for something. I'm not here to be treated in a certain way or mistreated or have just a life full of microaggressions and racism. That's not what I'm here for. Absolutely. I'm here to, contribute. I have something to contribute, a lot to contribute, and I will contribute. So no one's going to stop me.
Well done to you. I think that's brilliant. Absolutely. So on your journey, what did you find most challenging so far on your journey? Is there anything in particular that you thought, maybe going independent or maybe not?
My independent journey, you mean?
Or just in your career journey, what have you found the most challenging so far?
Oh, probably, just being, introduced into senior leadership roles as a woman and as a Black woman, it's tough. Yeah. People have all sorts of preconceptions of you and it's hard to overcome that. Yeah. And also working abroad as well. So I worked in Switzerland for 4 years, which was fantastic. That? Yeah, well, I was traveling back and forth. I wasn't there all the time, but I spent quite a lot of time. I think at one point they said I had to pay taxes because I'd been there for so long. Wow. Over the year. Yeah, I was there for something like over 100 days.
Right.
And so, I was there all the time. And that was wonderful because I got to experience culturally, different ways of working. And I've always loved that, working with Germans and Italians and French and Swiss. And I love all of that. And that's why I'm always in multinational organizations. But Switzerland is a very unique place. They are a unique country in that they're impartial and neutral. But I've had good experiences and bad. People have been really nice to me, like gone out of their way to look after me. When I've been abroad, so I've been to Czech Republic many times. I worked in Czech Republic in my early career. And people, when I worked with you, actually, I used to go to a Czech Republic. Remember, we had a development center there. You might not remember that.
I remember that one.
Yeah, I went to Czech Republic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they were in Prague, and they were so nice to me in Prague, like really lovely. They used to do little, people in the street would talk to me and look after me and say, oh, be careful. Some people are not nice to Black people, but they would look after me. Yeah,
so nice that they looked out for you.
I think, what I've learned is that you shouldn't just blanket, everybody with the same brush. You can't assume that all white people are bad, all Europeans are bad, all, it just doesn't work like that. Just the same as Black people. We're not all perfect.
We're not all the same, are we?
We're not all the same. So do be open, do be receptive to new experiences and new people, because you never know, you might be surprised.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that. I always like the idea of working internationally. Most of my clients have been UK based, like a couple European. One of my favorite ones are German. And they were great clients to work with as well. So
exactly.
I get it completely on that. But I think that's interesting. So, I suppose a question I wanted to ask you is, you're not necessarily in the situation as a leading employer per se, client perspective. But with your internal comms hat on, and when you was in an in-house role, what would you be looking for from your employer? You know, what makes a good working environment?
For me, it's got to be culturally diverse.
Right.
Even if it's a UK specific firm, like most of your clients, there has to be some representation that just goes outside of the typical UK, resident. So I want to see different faces, different backgrounds, not just culturally, but also socially.
Yes.
I want to see a good mix of people who are coming from universities, but also from apprenticeships.
Yes.
People who are perhaps neurodiverse. I want to see some willingness to accept people who are dyslexic, who have autism, that kind of thing. But also a willingness to change and learn. There's a lot of companies that are stuck in their ways and won't do anything different.
I believe that.
And for me, that's the death knell.
No, I believe
you've got to have a willingness to do different things.
Yeah, but I think that is the key, and I feel like a lot of that comes down from leadership, and depending on who you've got at the helm, because I feel like sometimes you have someone at the helm who is very much like go getting. Yes, I want to get this done, and then if that changes, and you've got somebody who is not that way, it can change the whole feel and culture of the organisation. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I worked in organisations where, I remember working for one of my clients. One of the places I worked with was Ofsted. And I remember being with the HMRC there, was a guy, and he was really friendly, a very open door, because obviously I was in the media team. So I was doing a lot of press stuff. So we needed lots of contacts. Then we had somebody else come in. It was a lady, and she was very closed off. It changed everything in terms of how we dealt with the media, how we dealt with stakeholders.
Right.
It just changed the entire culture. It went from being open to like this very kind of closed offness and trying to pull her out. It was just interesting to just see the dynamic change totally.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's so important to have the right people in the right position.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I totally get what you mean. It is everything emanates from leadership, for sure.
Absolutely. And there's another question that I've got on here is about diversity, because you mentioned that. And I think you just touched on it. I'm going to say, what does diversity look like for you? Because I feel like it's a word that gets bandied about a lot. What does it look like? It does.
I mean, people always think diversity, relates to ethnicity, but it's not, is it? There's lots of other things, like I said, neurodiversity. It's to do with, disabilities. It's to do with, men and women in a good mix, LGBTQ, all of those things. It's just about acceptance, really, from my perspective, accepting people for who they are. Not what they are, not looking at the wheelchair, or not looking at the colour of the skin, not looking at the learning disability, and understanding what people can bring to the party, because everyone brings something, don't they, to the party?
Exactly, absolutely.
Yeah, no matter how small.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I feel like the bigger thing that people need to focus on at the moment is the equity part. Treating people fairly. Everyone says they're equal opportunities employer, but then you look at their staff and you're thinking, really? We could all say things, but it's about the action. Like you say, it's about, accepting people, but also being open to that and being open to change. It's so important.
Exactly.
So let's touch on some of your proudest moments. So tell us about some of your, proudest moments. It can be work or personal, as well as any career highlights that you want to share with us.
Yeah, I've had some really good highlights over the last just probably 3 years. So last week, actually, I ran a half marathon at Finsbury Park.
Amazing.
Yeah, I got my medal. I should have brought it here.
You should have brought it. Absolutely, yes.
And it wasn't a brilliant time, but I'm just so, proud of myself for completing the race. I run really quite long distances now, and that's with, a lot of work's gone into that. So I'm really proud of my physical fitness. I also launched my podcast, Engagement Express, in 2020 in June.
Excellent.
So we're now nearly 2 years in, and 46 episodes.
Amazing.
Which has been a lot of work. And also my short stories that I mentioned earlier called Shop Window. I'll grab one now.
Yes, please.
There we go.
Oh, how cool.
Available on Amazon.
Nice. So what are they about? Come on, give us a bit of an intro into that then. What is the Shop Window about?
Oh, well, it's a collection of short stories, so really eclectic. There's no theme, there's no consistency. It's just literally standalone stories, 5 of them, on really different topics. So everything from a woman who you think is going to be arrested to two men who meet for lunch and ends up having a really supernatural experience.
Oh, this sounds interesting. So it's adulty type content, would you say? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, it's not, you know, I wouldn't say a child couldn't read it, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to access some of the language. So yeah, from a teen upwards. I would recommend.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, good stuff. I think that's great, and some great achievements there. Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah,
some great highlights there. So what are your thoughts about the industry as a whole in terms of PR and comms? What do you think will change? How do you see it evolving over the next kind of few years? We know AI is huge. Right,
I'm hopeful. So we've got people like Ronke Lawal. I hope you've come across Ronke.
Yes, I've got to interview her soon. Yeah.
Oh, are you? Wonderful. Yeah. And hopefully you're interviewing, what's her name? Elizabeth.
I've dropped her an email, waiting for her to get back to me. So
okay, Elizabeth is another one. Yeah, so they're really doing a lot of work in that space.
Yeah.
They've even set up networks, which are doing brilliantly. I know PR. I've got the PR week downstairs that showcased. They had a whole issue rather, dedicated to Black PR pros.
Yeah.
And that was fantastic. I was like literally, flicking through the pages, thinking, I didn't know, all these Black PR pros were out there.
Yeah, so they're here. We are here.
You're here, exactly. So just give them exposure. Yeah, exactly. I'm really pleased, and there's so many that are actually creating their own.
Absolutely. I've got Kamika coming on next. I think it's next month. I'm interviewing Kamika Pierce. So she is the one who set up the Black Communications Network.
Yes,
professionals as well. So there are things that are definitely happening. I know you mentioned Elizabeth, and she runs the BME PR Pros.
Yeah,
and we know she's doing things with the Blueprint as well, which is great.
She is.
Yeah,
she is.
Yeah, so that's great.
Yeah, so I'm really hopeful because I see those people, working really hard in the background, and I know I can always do more to help. But I think we need to give back. Us, elders, I suppose we are now. Should now start helping and mentoring and supporting Black people.
I think mentoring, absolutely. People of colour or, whatever makes sense. But I think, absolutely. Right. Absolutely. And I think that's what I meant to ask you is also, what are the key lessons you've learned throughout your career? That, what kind of advice would you give to young people who are considering entering the industry?
What I would say is always, always, always be professional. It's not easy. I've been there so many times, even in the work I do now, I always remind myself, be professional, because that will save you.
Yeah.
I know it sounds like a strange thing to say. What I mean by it is not obviously do your work, do all those things, but be professional in your persona, the way that you present, respect yourself, and then everything else will flow from that. So think to yourself, no matter how people are treating you, no matter how you're being spoken to, always have your head held high and think, I'm worth it, like the L'Oreal advert says, and just be professional. And then when everything's over, you can look back and say, right, I was being treated badly. I might not have been spoken to nicely, but I kept my head held high. I don't mean tolerate bad behavior. I was just going to say
don't tolerate nonsense out there. No. If you're not happy, move on, move
on. But that's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's part of being professional. Have the confidence to say to yourself, this isn't for me.
Absolutely. And also don't be scared to challenge as well. And in terms of, pushing it up the ladder, making sure you bring it to your management, try to look at any issue, people who are around you. If it is your manager that is giving you the issue, then obviously you're going to have to look to go outside, but always speak to people outside as well. Anybody else who's in comms or getting involved with networks, like we just mentioned, BCN or the BME Pros, because there's always going to be someone there that you could potentially, sound out or try and take some advice from.
That's a really good point. So have a professional network around you that you can relate to and speak to if you do have any issues, because it's always nice, isn't it, to have that third party view, where they're not invested in the business, they don't know what's going on, they can give you impartial advice. So that's a really good one. Use your network.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree with that one. And lastly, we're going to get into sort of the mindset side of things. So I always like to ask people how they deal with the kind of internal mindset war that we have to deal with on a daily basis. Like, how do you manage the self-limiting beliefs, that kind of thing?
Oh, just read, watch, listen to podcasts, talk to your network, get a mentor if you can. have someone who you can speak to, like a coach. So I've worked with loads of coaches over the years, and they've done me more good than I probably even realized. Yeah. So constantly work on yourself, constantly develop yourself. Don't be afraid to invest in yourself. Don't say, that's going to cost me £600. I could go on holiday. I could buy this dress. Yeah. All those things are, material things.
Yeah.
But obviously you need a break. You need to look after yourself physically, but do invest in yourself. Do develop yourself by listening and learning from others, because there's always something new to learn.
Absolutely agree with you. Absolutely agree. And looking back over your journey, would you do it all over again?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would do all of it. Some of it's been quite painful, but yeah, certainly a lot of it I would do over again. Yeah, I'd probably come at it with those lessons learned and do things maybe differently. But to be honest with you, je ne regrette rien, as they say in French. I don't regret anything. I've lived my life.
You've got to live your life. That's what I feel. I feel like I try and remember the motto of not having any regrets. Because we always do what we think is right in that time.
Right, exactly.
As long as you can feel like you're doing it with a good intention, then you can't beat yourself up about it.
No, exactly. True.
Absolutely. So one of the funny questions I like to ask is, what's the worst or best advice you've been given in your career? Because one of the people I had, I think, was telling me they were told that this isn't really going to be a career for them. It's like, really?
I don't know about the worst advice. The best advice I know I've been given is you've got to play the game.
Okay.
Which still sticks with me to this day. And I knew what he meant because I was miserable. And maybe it was the best and worst advice, because he said to me, I can see you're not happy. I don't want to be here either.
Oh, wow.
Because we'd been dragged to a corporate event, and it was in the middle of nowhere in the countryside. It was beautiful,
right?
And there were gazebos, and it was a hot day, and we all had to dress up. We were dragged there, literally kicking and screaming. And this guy and I were very similar, and he was an English white guy, and he was much older than me. And he said, "I don't want to be here." He said, "I'd rather be at home with my girlfriend, but we've got to play the game."
Play the game, interesting, isn't it? It is a game. I'm telling you, it really is a game.
It is a game.
It is. And as soon as you realise that, you'd be like, okay, right. As much as it sounds like a cliche thing to say, there is truth in that.
There is truth in it. It's right.
Definitely. And my last question for you, my lovely Kate, is: do you have any rules that you've implemented to help you along your career journey?
Rules? Yes. Always be on time, as much as possible. Always be professional. That's what I said to you earlier, in terms of your look and feel, the way you speak, and the way you interact with people. Always be respectful. Don't disrespect people. Always try to be kind, no matter what level the person you're speaking. So I often strike up conversations with cleaners, people doing the dishes. I have conversations.
Very much like that.
Yeah, exactly. You're a human being. I'm a human being.
We're human. Exactly. I don't care about your title.
How was your weekend? I don't just make a beeline for the senior executive and start talking to them. No, I'll talk to them, but then I'll also talk to the janitor. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so true, and it's very, very good point. Being respectful, having manners. Manners do not cost a thing.
Yeah, no.
And I feel like talking to people at all different levels is very respectful. I do that anyway. I've always been that kind of person. I don't like people. I'm very friendly. I'll talk to everybody.
Right.
And it is a bugbear of me when people are rude and will not just have the decency to even just greet you. I remember working in the firm, and I think I put this in my Caribbean background or something, but because I remember working in a firm, very senior person comes in, just come to me, beelines to me for whatever I could help him with. But didn't even have the courtesy to say hi, everybody, blah, blah, blah. It just went straight into it. So I just stopped and I said, firstly, good morning. Right. And then he kind of was taken aback. I said, well, hello first. The first thing we'll do is to greet each other. Don't just come around and just tell me what you want. We're human beings. We have interactions here. And I just thought it was unbelievable.
That's
unbelievable.
amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing.
Like you're a machine or something.
Absolutely. And because I was a bit junior, he's probably thinking he was definitely taken aback. But
I can see you doing that.
Yeah. After that, he was fine. He was always like very good with me. But I just thought there's no need for rudeness.
No.
And we all come here. We all come here to get along and get our jobs done. But that's
right. Exactly. Yeah. No, well done to you for being bold enough to say that.
Yeah, I mean, it does take courage to do that in itself. Yeah. But I think I was more ticked off, to be honest. I just thought, I just went off to nursery. I don't have to do all this nonsense, Yeah, it was true. That kind of mindset, But I kept it professional, of course, as you'd say, Kate.
Of course, yeah.
But thank you so much for taking your time to be with me and to share your experiences. I've really enjoyed talking with you. And,
thank you so much.
It's been very beneficial with your sharing and everything. Tell people where they can find you if they want to, connect.
Oh, yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn every day. So that's at Kate Isichei, Isichei, or you can look me up via Engagement Express on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or my website is wheretolookcoms.co.uk.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. So, guys, thank you for tuning in to this great session that we've had speaking with Kate Isichei. I will be back with more comms talent and for them to divulge their wonderful working experiences. So stay tuned. We will be back with our new episode very soon. Thanks for tuning in.